We're going to start with Edric. He'll be starting first, but he's not here. He was here. We're going to... Yes, that's right. All right. Okay. So there was an Englishman, American, and an Australian. And they were...
The recording is... Go. They were. Go, do it. Do it. Finish it. Finish it.
All right, there's an Englishman, an American, and an Australian, and they're all surgeons. The top surgeons in the world. They had a conference, and they were all chatting away, and they're all boasting and saying how good they were. And the American would say, yeah, we have the best surgeons in the world. I know this guy had both of his legs chopped off. Now, we sewed him back on, and he won in the Olympics. He won the 100 and the 200-meter sprint. And then the Englishman said, well, that's nothing, chappie. I know this guy who had both of his arms chopped off, and he won Wimbledon 3 years in a row. And then the Australian said, well, that's nothing, mate. I know this guy who had his head chopped off. We sewed it back on, and now he's Prime Minister of Australia. All right, well, we'll go ahead and start. We'll probably have a few people drifting in. But it's my privilege to welcome you here for our first workshop for today. And our first speaker is going to be Edric Mendoza, who is a edupreneur. He's a homeschool father of 5 children. I believe homeschooling begins from the time they're born. You actually start your homeschooling journey at that point. You teach them how to read, well, you teach them how to walk, how to talk. How important is that? But anyway, Edric is also involved in the media industry, and he loves technology, and he's a TV personality. And please welcome him as he speaks to us today.
Good morning. My goal, as I start off the panel, really, is to help talk about how we have learned how to start things from one in our movement in the Philippines. So I want to open up with this video, which might not be new to some of you, but just bear with the video, and there are some insights we will actually glean from this to help us realize how you can actually start something from just a few in your respective regions or areas.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut, and it's not 2 nuts. 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers, because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is overglorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
So, for the record, let's wait for it to die down. For the record, I was not that shirtless dancing guy. All right, none of the people in here were right. But here's the point, and what I liked about what he said. I liked what he said about, leadership. Sometimes we tend to think everybody needs to be a leader. But instead, maybe what we need to see is we need to be a first follower. The area that I disagree with what he said, when I look at the homeschooling movement, I think everybody, in effect, everyone has to be a good first follower. In our case, in the Philippine homeschool movement, there was a Christian missionary that came to the Philippines. She, in the Philippine movement, became the lone nut. But really, she was a first follower of somebody whom she had learned it from in America. And it caught on so that my wife, who was homeschooled, her mother was a first follower of that Christian missionary. But to the people that she was talking to about, she actually was seen and perceived as a lone nut. So what we have seen, and the one thing I want to share that I gleaned from this video about the Philippine homeschooling movement, the one message that I'm going to share in this short time is that we all need to be, and what we have learned, we all need to be a good first follower. Not just a first follower, but a good one. And let me expound on that. Be a good first follower. Can you just look at the person beside you right now and say, be a good first follower? Be a good first follower. 3 things that we've learned about what that means to make it practical. I mean, the idea is to make this practical, so I hope that this gets a little bit more teeth as I go through it. The first, in being a good first follower, the reality, at least in the movement and what we have seen, is you need to choose a good lone nut. To be a good first follower, because there's so many different perspectives. There's so many ways to go about it. So what we have learned and what we saw is, okay, now that we see this homeschooling thing, where do we go? So we saw it from this person, the lone nut. And then we saw it from another lone nut. To be a good first follower, you need to choose a good lone nut. So what did we do? I caught the vision of homeschooling because of my wife, as I mentioned, and we had our first son. I come from a private school, a Jesuit school, all the way through, one of the better colleges and schools in our country. My father came from the same school system, and I had no problems with the education format I was from. In fact, one of the things I have learned is from my father, he said, son, whenever you make big decisions, always decide between 2 good things. You never leave one bad thing and then go to another. Or never leave something because you're unhappy with it and then go to something where you think you'll be happier. Because the tendency is, if you're not happy where you are, what makes you think you'll be happy where you go? So the reality was, I was very happy with my education system, very happy. I was blessed to have a good track record. I was president of our high school class, captain of our team, and all these things. So from a school standpoint, I wasn't one of those that said, I hate school, and therefore I will do something different. I loved it. But my wife, she was homeschooled. We met at the university. And her mother was our first exposure to homeschooling. She was a lone nut in our eyes. And it seemed to have worked. But the systems, by the time we had our own son, were different. 15, 20 years down the road, systems were different. We had technology. So my clan they were now looking at the form of education we would choose, and we decided to experiment with our son. Elijah is his name. We decided to choose homeschooling, so we now needed a new lone nut. Where would we go? Who would we follow for homeschooling? I was blessed that at that time, we had come across a group called HSLDA, and there was a lady named Barbara West in the Philippines who was representing that at that time. So we got ideas from her. We mounted our first small conference with her as one of our speakers. And through that network, we were able to meet some other people from the U.S. I was able to live with a family in Maryland that was homeschooling to get to understand it better. The guy's name is Pastor Gary Cox. He has a program called Walkersville Christian Family Schools, and he had 10 kids. So to a certain degree, he was my lone nut. I learned from him, and I got to meet Chris Klicka, wonderful, godly, good man who had a heart for international homeschoolers. He became another lone nut who I learned from. And we took the practices from those two groups, brought it back to our country, and started going. So very, very important. The first principle, if we are to be a good first follower that we have learned, you need to choose a good lone nut. There's a statement from one of my favorite books of all time in Proverbs. It says, plans fail when there is no counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. So we need to choose a good lone nut. In fact, to be a good first follower, you might need several good lone nuts, as we have learned in our experience. And as you choose a good lone nut, what I was really encouraged by is as I got to meet some of these Americans who were training and equipping us, they became our source of materials. How do we do these things? What can we bring back? We looked at systems that we could adopt to our local scenario, a framework that could be contextualized. Now, depending on your country, the Philippines, we're very Western in our orientation. 88% of our country is fluent in reading and writing in English, which is why we have a very strong sector that is about 10% of our GDP now of business process outsourcing. People from different regions will have call centers, for example, in the Philippines because of our ability to take on English. So it wasn't hard for us to adopt an American type of system, which is why I'm sharing that. It might be different for you in your region, but that worked for us. So we looked at that model, we brought it back, and I liked how, if you saw the video earlier, it said what's important about a leader, the guy, the lone nut, is he must be easy to follow. So we found a lone nut that was easy to follow. We found, the publishers and the groups in America that said, here's a material that's easy to follow because it now has a parent's guide as opposed to a teacher's guide. That was very helpful for us. And I loved how at first we were a little insecure because here we were, the brown Filipinos coming to, first world country America. But they, in a sense, the people we met, they embraced us as equals, which was very easy. They didn't say, you know what, we're better than you, you better do it this way. They said, hey, here's what's worked for us. It might work for you. Bring it back. And we did. And we loved that. We loved how, it's not about them and us, it's about the movement. So that is very important that we learn. Choose a good lone nut. Second, now that you've chosen that, as you saw in the first follower, you need to now show something disruptive or distinctive. If we want, and what we realized is if we wanted my parents and my clan to realize that homeschooling made sense, because they were skeptical. I am the eldest grandchild of a clan of 7 siblings. My father has 7 siblings, and all of them came from good private schools, some of the best here and even in the U.S. So when they heard that we were going to homeschool, their eyes went in all different directions. They said, are you guys out of money? Is there something wrong with your child? There's a problem going on? And we said, no, just wait. And so we had to do something distinctive. We needed to show that in our own family, the choice we made sense. So what did we do? My sons, one of the things I learned in the homeschooling movement is we don't focus so much on academics, but we focus on character. Because character will outlast any of the learnings you have. That's at least in our embrace, or at least our perspective of it. Sure, academics are important. We will not disregard that. Asians were very big on academics. So we still prioritize that. But beyond that, we've learned to focus on character. So my sons, I have 3 sons and 2 daughters in that order. As they were growing, our experiment, Elijah, my burden was to make sure he grew up as a gentleman. So a gentleman would stand up, and when he met people at an early age, he would shake their hands and say, "Hi, nice to meet you, Mr. Sheen, or Mr. Chapman, or Mr. Huebner." And my other sons would do the same. So now, as they were growing, when we would have family gatherings, and Filipinos, we love big family gatherings, whenever we would get together, they would stand and say to all their new uncles and aunties, they would say, "Hi, good to meet you, my name is Elijah." And they would say, "Where do you go to school?" And then they say, "Oh, we don't. We homeschool." Really? And now, a majority of my family, my cousins and my relatives, wherever they are in the world, what education method do you think they're doing? Homeschooling. They've caught on. Even if they have enough money to send them to the most expensive schools in the world, we realize we need to show something disruptive and distinctive, something different. And we need to be intentional. It cannot happen overnight. I had to sit with my kids and say, "Children, we will focus on character." This is what the Bible says. It's one of our favorite books. So we teach them about God's Word and we raise them up. So all of our children, when you meet them, I wish I could have brought them here. We usually go and give talks, and we bring our children now to talk to other families, and they will do that. As they meet executives or relatives, they will stand up and say, "Nice to meet you." And people catch that. They say, that's not common in today's world. So that's one example. Another is we also show how our learning environment in homeschooling allows us to personalize the education. At a certain window of my life, I gave back to my private school and did some teaching. Marketing was my background, so I did some part-time teaching. And I learned that as a teacher, our dream is to personalize education, to make sure that everybody could learn the way that they learn best. But you can't. So in a homeschooling environment, we tried to do that. And with my son Elijah, my eldest boy, he's about 13, about 3 weeks ago, we were in Dubai. So hello to our friend in Abu Dhabi. And a part of what I do, as was mentioned by Stuart earlier, is I'm an anchor of a business channel in the Philippines. If you heard of people like Dave Ramsey or Susie Orman, we try to adopt the same in the Philippines. So I talk about personal finance. And my son, because of our homeschooling, he caught on. At 9 years old, he got interested about stock trading and investing. So we opened up a stock portfolio for him and a trading account. I thought that he would fall asleep at the lecture where I brought him to. It's a 3-hour lecture, and it was a room full of adults. He was the youngest people. They were college students. He was 9 years old. I bought him a jacket, snacks to fall asleep. And as he sat there, I was expecting him to knock out in 10 minutes, but he stayed awake for 3 hours, and he said, "Oh, Dad, isn't that so cool?" I said, "Ugh." And at the end of it, I said, "All right, what do you want?" He said, "Dad, isn't it amazing how Jollibee," it's a major food company in the Philippines, "Jollibee's been able to reinvent itself 3 times, so the share price has gone out the roof." I said, "Who are you?" And that simple story is a story we love to share, because now my son is my business partner in that sense. He's 13 years old, just turned 13. He travels around the world and our country, and we give talks on personal finance, primarily to Filipinos. And he goes and he talks about his portfolio and how it peaked at 33%. But very recently, because of the market, it's been fluctuating. And people look at him and say, "Where do you go to school?" And he tells them, "I'm able to go around with my dad midday with you in your country because I homeschool." So number 2, show something disruptive and distinctive. Do it intentionally. Third, if you're able to choose a good lone nut, a mentor, someone you can learn from and you can adopt it to your environment. Number 2, they see it in your own life that there's something weird, but a good thing, a good weird about you, then they will catch on. And the third, as they see that, spread the word. That's what we did. I used to be a corporate guy. I was working for a multinational, and I was in marketing. But I said, so at the end of the day, this firm will be able to sell probably the world's best tomatoes and pineapples. Sure. But is that really what I want to do? And I saw something different about homeschooling and how it changed our family. And it changes family. So I said, you know what? Let's spread the word. I jumped into the homeschooling movements. And that's what I've been primarily doing through the organizations I'm involved in the Philippines. And as we learned from the lone nut, I joined the movement with one private organization. We had about 120 students. 7 years later, as I took the risk and jumped into this whole movement, that private organization has now about 1,500 students across 22 countries, primarily Filipinos, who we go and equip. And then we started a national organization because we wanted to spread the word. as was instructed by Chris Clica, Edric, go back, start something in the Philippines. We try to spread the word. We have a national organization that represents about 15 private organizations and 5 independent organizations that has about maybe 12,000 students across all of them. And what we have learned is that once this is in place, you choose a good lone nut, you show something disruptive, and you're intentional about it, and you spread the word, it will catch on. We learned that as we spread the word, the reason why 1 and 2 are important is you need to put your own oxygen mask first. You know how they say that on airplanes? In case of emergency, put on your own oxygen mask first, and then you put it on your child if you have one. We learned that. We need to equip ourselves first. And as we did, me, my wife, our home, we spread the word. And the movement is growing. The Philippine movement in the last 7 years has tripled. And we see it to continue to grow. And maybe even very soon, we will be in Abu Dhabi with our friends here, mounting something in the Middle East with the Filipinos and other expatriates there as well. So this is what we have learned. The single message I wanted to share with you from our humble experience, it's still a very young and small movement, really. 0.05% of the total school-age population is what homeschooling seems to represent in the Philippines so far. Still very young. But there's one thing we have learned in our short window. It is to be a good first follower if you want it to start with you. So can you look at the person beside you again and say, be a good first follower? That's my time. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass you back on to Stuart.
Thanks very much, Edric. All right, our next speaker is going to be Gerald Huebner from Canada, and he's already been introduced to you previously. He's our chairman of the Global Home Education Conference. Welcome, Gerald.
Thank you, Stuart. And Edric, thank you for that, for your challenging message. I'd like to share my frustration. I've been involved in home education leadership now for over 25 years. And something that I've seen over and over again in Canada is homeschoolers that really care about their kids, but don't see much else. Homeschoolers that they do their homeschool thing. Sometimes they come to a homeschool conference if they find it of use. But to do anything more than that, to be part of a support group, well, maybe if it's something their family can benefit from, they'll join in there. But it's a very self-centered. It's a very family-centric, that it's what's in it for me, for us. Now, I have to be careful in the frustration and the criticism, because homeschooling is tough. It's hard. Something I say regularly that people will call and say, I'm thinking about homeschooling. And, they'll ask questions like, do you know anybody that can homeschool my kids? Well, you can do a call center to the Philippines, maybe. But it's hard. It's good, but it's hard. And so I have to be really careful on criticizing the families, because they're fully absorbed. They're like, the moms want to quit every second day. And that's normal. But how do we expand our viewpoint? How do we say, well, how can you get involved? And, we're here because we care about our kids and our grandkids. And we want this movement to grow, not so that we can have a big organization, but so that other people can be able to experience the freedom to teach their children as they feel best, to pass on their values, their goals, do the great things, to grow the great kids who will do great things. That's why we're here, and we want other people to be able to experience that. And so we kind of dance around. Not very well. And sometimes we have some followers, but we have a whole bunch of people that largely sit there and say, well, thank you very much for that dance. That's really appreciated that. We'll come next year, maybe. And it can be frustrating. And Ray is nodding his head because he's been in many states. And I know that some of you, Bo, in South Africa, I'm sure have experienced this, that, how do you get people to even think some step beyond local, something just one step beyond their own family. And here I'm think globally? Like, really? Like that's such a big step, going beyond the four walls of my house. And it's a big step to even consider that people could do that. I believe it is possible. I believe it is possible because I've seen it. I've seen that people, families, mums and dads, and their children, when they have the opportunity to do something that goes beyond their family. It may be just the local support group, it may be the regional organization, it may be the national organization, but when they take that step, what we found in our family, it wasn't what we brought to that table. When we got involved in that support group, yes, it was great. But that involvement and that leadership and that skin in the game actually benefited us far more, I think, than we were ever able to bring to that table. We benefited far more from being involved in leadership in the support group, leadership in the provincial organization, leadership in the national organization, and leadership in the international organization. What do I do? Like, what do I really bring to it? But the benefits that I saw in our family, to our children who had their eyes opened, who were able to see that they were part of something bigger, that they were able to interact with others through the support group, through the provincial organization, through the national organization, was a huge benefit to us. It was an investment. Yeah, it cost money. It cost time. We had to sacrifice. I get 6 weeks of vacation a year. I'm very fortunate. I'm very fortunate to be a government bureaucrat in Canada and to get lots of vacation. And I'm not bragging, but I spend 5 weeks of that vacation every year on homeschool activities that I consider to be an investment. And it's a privilege to be able to do that. Next week, I get to have a vacation. I'm going to an island just off of Brazil. This week, I also have a vacation, but it's a different kind. And I think it's a matter of how can we think differently? How can we have families that say, not what am I putting into it, but what am I investing? What can I invest in a bigger thing that will do something in my family? And the challenge is that I'm not good at marketing. I'm a bureaucrat. I write policy papers and do boring things. And my wife says, well, okay, now say it in plain English. I think we need to be able to give people the experience, to be able to in some way see something that will touch the lives of their children. For us, it was when we were part of the national organization in Canada and part of attending the U.S. leadership conferences, our children were able to interact with other children who had similar values, and they were able to, because we live in a pretty isolated area. Like there was like we don't live in an igloo, okay? And our TVs don't wind up, but it's a fairly isolated area where we don't have big things in terms of homeschool support groups. Some of those things took the place, at least in part, of being able to do that homeschool support. And it gave our children and us a bigger view. So thinking globally, acting locally, I think acting locally can be simply the determined, distinctive, disruptive things that Edric talks about of what you can do in your home and what you can encourage others to do in their home to reach out. It may not be inexpensive in time or finances, but I believe that by expanding the viewpoint, it does several things. I think it certainly has a benefit to your home and your family and your children. But I believe it also has benefits in expanding the minds and opening the eyes of leaders and developing leaders that will say, well, there's actually something more here than just doing this event for my family and my friends. to me, it's a little bit of simply getting people to lift their heads up and look around. Because I think homeschoolers naturally have their heads down and their noses to the grindstone, because it's hard. And every so often we need to be able to just lift our head up and look around and stand up and say, let's try this. Let's take a risk. I'm not sure where it's going. We certainly never determined that we wanted to be something. We had no idea. And when I walked up on the balcony this morning for the first session, my thought was, what am I doing here? But there's a verse in the Bible that I think is very pertinent. You were called for such a time as this. I think we're put in places. I think that we make decisions, but we're put in places to be able to do things that call us to step out. And Edric, the video that you played of that crazy guy jumping up and down, we're called to stand out. And sometimes we're alone. So we can be distinctive sometimes, and sometimes we may stay alone. But then let's try another song. Let's try another way. So acting, what is it? Something globally and something locally. That's the one. That's our topic. So that's the problem when I stand up here and say, I'm really looking forward to what I have to say. When we look at it from a different perspective, when we say, there is something more beyond my family. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm really curious. I'm really curious to explore what these things could look like. I think that's the first stage. And that guy that goes over to dance beside the crazy guy, he was just curious. He was just curious. Let's see where this goes. And I think we need to cultivate that curiosity. Stuart, back to you.
Thanks very much, Gerald. We'll move right along to our next speaker. Sergio, if you'd like to come forward. Sergio is also on the board from Spain, although he's currently living in Brussels, and father of 3 homeschooled children, and has been up the front a few times already, so I'll just hand over straight away. Thanks, Sergio.
No presentation. So it's think globally and act locally. Huh? Actually, this sentence was is said that it was first pronounced by René Jules Dubois. He's a pathologist. You know, he interacted with the virus, and he thought that in order to attack some illness, you have to act locally. You know, and those local acts were to produce an effect on the total. Okay, but according to another theory, it was not René Dubois, but Patrick Guedes. Patrick Guedes was an urban planner. He was an urban designer, and he pronounced that sentence or that phrase to explain how sometimes the things that you build in the city and sometimes parts of different metropolis work together to create a universe, and that's very, very interesting, his way of being. But according to another theory, it was David Browner. He was an environmentalist. He fought for the environment and for the defense of the environment, and he was always explaining how the little things that we do locally affect globally the environment. But they are all wrong. You know, the very truth of it is that that sentence was first pronounced by our chairman, Gerald Huebner. And he pronounced, believe it or not, that sentence 150 years ago, referring to homeschooling. Really. What it means is that you have to create base efforts. They're called like that, base efforts, root efforts, and those root efforts at the local level will create for the movement to work, interact and create relations, and those relations are just like something that is going to create a whole. You know? Because the movement itself, without a base, without a root, is nothing but a code. It's like a film. It doesn't really stand. But if the roots are well planted, the movement grows and the movement makes a difference. So one is not without the other. If well rooted, they work perfectly and they create lots of things. When I first went to Berlin in 2012, I was so impressed. I was so shocked by what I lived there, the people I met, and everything that happened there. That I wrote a memo file of 50 pages, explaining every single conversation I had. I was really, and I took notes of everything. I was in the elevator. Yeah, I was in the elevator with this guy. I can't remember his name, but he was Polish, and he told me this and that, and I spoke to these children, and they were fantastic. And every single thing that happened to me, I did it for two reasons. First reason, because you never know when you're going to need the information. Maybe sometime you meet again, let's say in, I don't know, Rio or something. And then you meet this guy, remember the conversation, and you follow up. But secondly, to remember how big that was. It was really, really big. And I've heard people saying, well, in Berlin, nothing really happened in Berlin. I say, what happened in Berlin was the seed of something huge. And we're witnessing, how that seed is being well planted and well rooted, and how that is growing, and hopefully in 2 years' time we're going to see it grow even more. René Dubois, I find it fantastic that René Dubois suggests that the ecological conscience should start at home. Isn't it nice? At home. Isn't it what we all think? I mean, everything, learning, education, teaching, whatever, everything starts at home, really. And from that, with that units, home units interacting, creating networks, creating relationships. That is when the movement is acting globally and making a change itself. So in a way, those three there were the first three theories. Who pronounced it first. As I said, they were all wrong. But one of them was a pathologist. The other one environment defender, and another one a planner, a designer. They all have a lot to do with this. These aspects come back to the homeschooling world, because for the environment in a world, I think we are helping preserve the world, and homeschool is. If you see the educational systems in most countries, specifically mine, and in others, as we've heard this week. Sometimes we think that we are the last chance for mankind. I mean, and not only to preserve our children from those systems, but also to make the system change. To teach the system that it has to change. And I witnessed that in some countries, because it's not that they are looking at homeschooling, but they are looking at lots of things that are done around the world that are changing the system itself, because it doesn't work, obviously. From the planning point of view, it's nice because the strategies that we are building here that are openly shown to you sometimes, and some other strategies that we are building and that will be shown maybe 2 years' time or whatever, those strategies are much more than just a meeting of people, just a meeting of researchers and people like me explaining things or explaining personal views of homeschooling. And a pathology, because sadly, and I have to say this very quickly, but sometimes I find there's some virus here and there that are like trying to affect us, and we have to be aware of, how we should root really hardly to avoid those viruses to attack us and to really affect us. People that say, we are not diverse, we are not some ways, and we have to try to overcome that. And in these days, I have already been sharing time and experience with you. I can assure you that if in Berlin I planted in my heart what I call the spirit of Berlin, and made me jump to the Parliament of Spain and fight the politicians there and try to convince my fellow members of my association in Spain of lots of things, and it really moved me. I call that the spirit of Berlin. But in these few days, I already built what I call the spirit of Rio. Spirit of Rio, I can assure you, is warmer, of course. mais caliente que Spirit of Berlin. It's also wider, wider, and to me it has more joy, more happiness, mais samba, mais jazzo catete, mais say. I probably won't write 50 pages for one thing. I don't have time because I have breakfast at 5 o'clock in the morning and I have to be presenting a movie. I have to write speeches, but I won't write 50 pages. But I can assure you that the root that I have planted and that it's in my heart, but locally that I will plant in my country will be something really, really big and will grow really, really strong. And for that, I thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Sergio. I now invite Tim Chen to come forward. Tim is the founder of Taiwan Homeschool Advocates. He has 3 children. He has a Polish wife. He is cross-cultural and multilingual in his own family. And Tim is going to share about his experiences on this very topic. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Stuart. Yes, Tim now has a voice. Thank you. I'm just waiting for the projector to. Okay, can I have the remote? Oh, he has the remote. Okay. So, yeah. Maybe I should stand on this side. It's better, yeah. Okay. Good morning. Sorry, I'm still there. Yeah. No jokes here. I don't have a good joke. I don't have a good joke. Saved by the technology. It's back. Excellent. Okay, thank you. Now, good morning. My name is Tim Chen. I'm from Taiwan, and this is my family. And there are 5 of us, and we've been homeschooling since 12 years ago. The one on the left is my daughter, Zosha. And she's been homeschooled since she was 5. And then she's 13 now, and also been homeschooled from very little, and Anya. And my wife is from Poland, like Stuart just introduced. And like Stuart and Edric, sorry. So we also went to Berlin together, and our family, but not Anya. Anya didn't go. This is Taiwan. Taiwan is very far from here, and for those who are not familiar, and it's an island off the coast of China. And today I'm going to talk about, and it's not far. We are somewhere down there. So to get from Taiwan to Brazil, I'll need to fly across 3 continents, and just to get here, Africa, Europe, and Americas. And so, and today I'm going to talk about a story about Hong Kong, which is an island also off the coast of China, but somewhere here, okay, just outside the ring. Well, in 2012, I went to Berlin with my whole family and to attend the GHEC, and then we came back. And we talk to people we know about what a wonderful experience we have. And a friend in Hong Kong at that time who had been homeschooling their kid. But there was a situation in Hong Kong which made it very, very difficult. Because the way to describe Hong Kong is that homeschooling is not illegal. There are 2 negatives in this sentence. Homeschool is not illegal. Okay, so what that means is that it's not saying that homeschool is legal and or is anything else. It's just it's not illegal. Reason is that in the education ordinance, which is the Hong Kong education law, it basically says that the school age children should go to school, and if they don't go without any reasonable excuse, okay, then the Education Bureau will make an inquiry. Then they'll order what is called the attendance order. So what that means in practice is that unless you can come up with an excuse why your kids shouldn't go to school, and then and that excuse needs to be approved personally by the Secretary of Education, then you are exempt from going to school. Otherwise, everybody have to go to school. So while the Education Bureau acknowledged that fact, school is not for everybody, and they are going to do it case by case basis, but they never publicly tell people about it. Okay, it's not in their interest to tell people because they don't believe in homeschooling, and therefore they choose to ignore the law which they are supposed to uphold. And this is not uncommon in many countries. Taiwan, we had that problem before as well. And at the beginning, when the central government passed a homeschool, not a regulation, just change the law, change the wording in the law, say that parents may choose to homeschool. The local education authority would do the same thing. They would say, well, we don't have the application form ready yet. Would you like to come by next year? And then you go there next year, and then they said, well, we don't have the application form because nobody is applying, so maybe we'll do it a year after. So this kind of thing, the government does it the same everywhere in the world. They don't want to enforce the law they don't like. And so what do? I mean, this is the situation in Hong Kong. We have a real problem there. So I got invited by this friend in Hong Kong and say, would you like to come to Hong Kong and meet with other people and talk about it? So I did. My whole family went for holiday. Again, it's another holiday diplomacy. So we went over Christmas time and talked to people in Hong Kong, met a few reporters and shared our stories, and went back. And the following year, in 2013, I invite Hong Kong families to come to Taiwan for our homeschool conference. And so it's the first time they see that it's possible to talk in public, that you can homeschool, etc., etc. So they got really excited. So in 2014, they decided to mount their own conference. And I forgot about this side. So basically, I explained earlier, the problem with the Hong Kong is that the EDB is acquiescence in the issue. So whenever somebody asks them, like a reporter asks them, what's homeschool? And they'll say, nothing. They just went silent. They don't tell you whether you can do it, you can't do it. And if a parent come and ask, can I homeschool? They go silent. They just simply don't want to answer questions. And so the challenge at that time was to get the public, to get the government to answer a question they are supposed to answer in the first place. How do you make government to do something they don't want to do? And because very easy for them, they just don't answer anything. And they don't need to lie, they don't need to protest, they don't need to do anything, they just quiet. So the challenge was that. So we got invited to this conference, bunch of homeschool parents in Hong Kong organized, and that's my daughter standing there sharing her story. And so in the conference, we invite a lot of people from Hong Kong, from other places, from Taiwan, and then we sat together in Hong Kong University, and we invite the government official to come. They did, and again, they would not say anything in public. they will sat there and listen to your presentation, then nod, and they say, it's about my pay grade. I'm not going to say anything. So again, you have the same problem. You still cannot break it. How do you do? That was a problem. And so the last day in the Hong Kong conference called Ed Diversity, actually, it's quite interesting. Education diversity, diversity. So so we all got together, to a boat and then go to the harbor and then think about what to do next. We flew all these people to come, and then we, apart from talking, we seem to accomplish very little concrete. We haven't really advanced our cause and getting homeschool parents in Hong Kong. What they want to know is, can I homeschool or not? Legally, yes or no? We couldn't do anything about it. So I share a story with my colleague in Hong Kong, my friends. I said, what we do in Taiwan, if we want the government to answer a very awkward question, we usually ask our elected representative, i.e. our city council or our legislator, to put the question in writing. And we ask very specific questions, and they will have to answer specifically. And that's it. We don't scream or shout or do anything because they just ignore us. We just ask them a question and see what they say. Unless they're going to lie publicly, they have to answer it. So the people in Hong Kong never thought about it. They say, wow, that sounds like an interesting idea. Maybe we can give it a try. So they did. And so 2 days later, in the Hong Kong LegCo, which is the Hong Kong Parliament, a legislator asked a question in writing. They said, very simply, these are very simple questions, no difficult question. First question, how many homeschooling families and children are in Hong Kong? You cannot lie about it. Either they have or you don't. You just tell us. And the second is, what are the application procedures? And the third is, what's the plan to promote homeschooling? That's it. And of course, all these questions have gone through a lot of thinking. Why are we asking those three questions? Why in this particular order? But they are very simple and plain questions, So the Education Bureau came back and answered all of them in public. And they did say in their statement at the end, very unwillingly, that they do not think it's for everybody, but if anybody who would like to give a go, please write to us in email or writing and we'll help them. And this is the first time ever in the history of Hong Kong the government came out to say that, yes, you can homeschool, and yes, there are 25 people already homeschooling Hong Kong, and yes, we can process your application. And so all this is done because we, starting from Berlin, we heard all this exciting story, and I invited my friend over to Hong Kong. We went to Hong Kong, we got together, and we started talking about things, and then we decided we have to do something about it, and to break this seems to be unbreakable lock on the acquiescence from the government, just ignoring parents' demand. You see, unlike Taiwan, Hong Kong is not a true democracy. Only about a quarter of the assembly are elected publicly. 3/4 are appointed. So the government don't care about people. They don't need to listen to what people are saying. But through a simple question and answer, and ask direct questions, the parents now can have it in writing in public, because all these are public record, and then go to the press or go to any parents in Hong Kong, say, here are the answers from the government, and yes, you can homeschool, and this is how you do it, and then you just need to write to the government and to process it. So, to sum up, if you have a question, write to me. And I may or may not be able to answer your question, but I can always come up with something. And then if you give it a try, the answer may surprise you. So the local answer to your question may lie somewhere around in the other side of the world. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Tim. I think that's a perfect example to follow on from what Gerald was saying, that we, and Sergio, how we can guide us, or you may feel called to support not only your local community, but to move on and support a nation around you. And I just started to think about the about 10 little small nations around Australia that perhaps I could get involved in as well. So thank you for that. Our next speaker is Irina from Russia, and she has also a member of the Global Home Education Board, and she's already shared some wonderful stories already through this conference, and I invite you to welcome her again today.
Thank you, Stuart. I have 3 kids, and I'm in homeschooling for 4 years. I did homeschool before that, but I didn't know the name, what I was doing. Can I have, please, my presentation? Yes, right. From the point of view of Orthodox Church, the individual choice in the heart of each of us influences directly the balance of good and bad in the world. So the understanding of the global processes going on is such that those not rulers of the world or empires or somebody else or Rockefellers are deciding for us, but each of us inside our heart decides for the world. So each homeschooler is personally responsible for the movement, right? No. Yeah, but this quote is unknown, but some people say that, I've seen that this belongs to Napoleon. He understood this, right? That the world suffers not because of the violence of bad people, but because of the silence of good people. We have to realize that not doing good very often means doing bad. He that gathers not with me scatters abroad. So not doing is destroying something. 4 years, I haven't been actively involved in homeschooling movement for first 3 years, but in the 4th year I realized that there's nothing going on. So we have 50,000 homeschoolers, and about 10 maybe to 20 people doing something. So all others are just total silence. I've never wanted to be a promoter, a public person, something like that, exposing my positions, but I realized that if I won't do that, no one else will do this. Because for 4 years there's no one. Nothing. And I haven't seen a single person who could do it at the level that I can do it with the people whom I have access to, who can promote it in this level. So what I'm doing is not my will. I force myself to do this, right? And because if salt is not salty anymore, who needs it? What Adam and Eve did in the paradise affected the whole world, right? So each of us, each country is a part of the total worldwide body. And the future of homeschooling is not decided in courts. It is decided in the heart of each of us. Each homeschooler chooses either to do something or just to stay at home doing his own business and homework. And each of us has to realize our responsibility in front of the global movement. So I'm going to be short. Thank you.
Outstanding. All right, we do have a little bit of time for questions. So if I'd ask all the panel members to come forward, and we'll have an opportunity. Have we got the mics on these working? Okay, Edric, are you going to kind of join us? All right, so we have our question.
I think this workshop is the crux of why we're here. Some of us have a great circle of influence, and others of us have a much smaller circle of influence. But I believe that to a certain extent, we are followers, but we may also be that lone nut that somebody else is maybe the first follower, and I just find too that being either one of those takes a lot of courage. So I just want to thank the panel for the personal work that you do, and for the talk, because it really, for me, it really touches on the heart of the matter. Gerald, when you spoke about that the homeschoolers not really looking beyond that, I've experienced that very recently, and that really spoke to me. But not to get disheartened, right? To still trying to expand the vision of people, to think that yes, you are concerned with your family, and that is crucial and it's very important. But you're also forging that path for other people, and we're here on because other people were courageous, and we want to continue with that courage and carry it on, so that people coming after us will benefit from that, leave something beautiful behind us, and so that they can benefit from it. So thank you very much. Not a question, I know, but
Just maybe one comment. One of the things that we saw early on was that people would end their homeschool journey. They'd graduate their youngest, and then they're gone. They would just leave. And one of the things that we saw is a very small number of people that stayed. And now there's a point at which, like, we don't want to have our curriculum halls cluttered with walkers. But I think that there is a place for us showing an example in continuing in leadership to free up the people that have young children to not worry about some of those things for a while, and to be able to stay in leadership.
Thanks, Gerald. Yeah. Would you mind just coming forward? We might get a bit of feedback if we put the microphone too far back.
I would like to know from all of the speakers what local action by some organization in another country could contribute towards freedom of homeschooling in your country.
We have freedom, but our freedom is fragile. And I would suggest that there's opportunity for us to be able to share the stories of the infringements on freedom. To be able to say, when we hear that the Supreme Court case is happening here in Brazil, and to be able to say, when that happens in Canada, I would like to be able to know that I have a network of families and friends around the world that I could say, could you help me? That when cases come, and I'll give you an example. There's a father that we're dealing with in court right now in Canada. It's a father with one child, a girl 12 or 13 years old. I can't remember exactly how old. He's homeschooling her. The mom had terminal cancer, passed away not that long ago. The father said, I will keep going on homeschooling our daughter. It was something they're both committed to. The authorities are saying, you're too close to your daughter. You shouldn't be homeschooling her. Now, we shake our head and say that is ridiculous. There's no charge of saying he's not doing a good job. There's no charge of saying the child is not progressing well. There's nothing else other than saying you're too close to your daughter, which is just a preposterous. Now, what I'd like to be able to know is that families in your country would be able to write to the Canadian embassies around the world and to get the message to Canada to say, what are you doing? Like, you can't allow this to happen. And for us to be able to stand with each other when those things happen, that would be an example to me.
I believe that without what was done in United States by people like McFarris, by pioneers like Deborah Bell, will never. Without it, I would nothing to rely on. I would nothing to build on. I would have to reinvent the wheel. I would nothing to appeal to. So its influence is tremendous on all the global movement.
Yeah. Oh no, please.
I just want to make sure I understand the question. It's what international activity can help a local challenge, especially if it's in the area of freedom, for example. So if country A has a problem, they don't have the freedom, is there an international activity that can help that country achieve its freedom? That's the question, right? I think that's what we're all here for. I mean, my straight answer to that would be that's an example of at least the intention of conferences like this, as I think Gerald was trying to articulate, is we want to show that, hey, you know what? By coming together like this, we either A, show templates of countries that have had challenges and have been able to overcome it so we can possibly adopt that to country A that might be challenged, or B, celebrate the successes that countries already have or the freedoms they have and how they've been able to sustain that, which I think is the case of the Philippines. I wanted to share this tomorrow, but I'll probably insert it already now. My daughter, so I have 5 kids, right? My 5-year-old daughter, with tears in her eyes, before we left, she said, "Daddy, why do you have to go?" And of course, as a father towards a daughter, my instinct was, yeah, why do I have to go? I should just be with my daughter. What the heck? Spend so much money, go all the way there. We have freedom anyway, let them worry about that, right? I mean, that's kind of what Gerald was sharing in his opening message yesterday. But I said, honey, Daddy's got to go and fight. Part of what I think I love about this global Congress is that for those of us that have the freedom and don't have the challenges yet, we go and fight. We go and say, you know what, we'll take part in this activity because in the statements we make here, hopefully, countries that don't have the freedoms, we can come forward and say, you know what, that's not right. And in the words of Gerald yesterday, I think he was saying, in Canada, you're very polite, so you say, excuse me. What's that line?
You can't do that.
So there, I think this is one definite way that we can help the local countries or local activities achieve freedoms.
Yeah, I totally agree with Edric. To me, what in my country provokes a feeling of what an injustice, what absolutely dreadful is that. The human stories, the really touchy stories, like the one from the Johanssons in Sweden. I remember. I don't know if you guys remember in Berlin when the Johansson case was being explained to us, and it was like a bunch of lawyers, maybe 25 lawyers there, and all of us were crying. I mean, but I don't mean upset. We were like with tears. It was so touchy, and it provoked in Spain a feeling not only among homeschoolers but among a lot of people that believe in justice. It provoked a wave of movement, and that really helped the homeschool movement in Spain. So I think we maybe should publicize more of those cases, those stories, Alan Islands, Sweden cases, the German cases, and all, because that's what really gets to people, to the heart of the people. A mother and a child, and injustice being held towards them.
I'll just speak from some of the experience that we've had in the U.S. and in particular how one state helped other states. Is one of the ways was through research. We found that bureaucrats like to look at data because then it's the data's fault. They don't want to have to make a decision on their own. They would much rather say, well, the data says that, so we just have to do that. And if you're a country that there is no homeschooling movement, there's no data. And so there's no data for them to point to. We were able, because of studies that were done in some of the states, we could say, well, look at what happened here and here and here. And you know, our states would be the same. It's working, and we've got some of the same problems. And so when globally you can fund research in your country, even though you say, hey, we're fine, we don't have any problems, fund the researchers, because that research study just continues to add to the weight of evidence that helps those bureaucrats then to say, oh, this must be the right thing to do because all the research says it's the right thing to do.
One other comment that I wanted to make, just to address the question of what could other countries do that could help Canada. Canada's a place that I've said is pretty young, pretty recent, and the only people that were there before the Europeans and others showed up was our First Nations peoples. So it was empty, sort of. But we have a lot of different ethnic groups, and we're a very multicultural nation. One of the things that we are not very good at is reaching out and connecting with some of those groups. So as an example, I was going to talk to Edric later, but I'm going to talk to him right now. And I would say, Edric, we've got a huge Filipino population in Canada that we're not really connecting with in home education. I'd like to explore, can we work together? And can the Philippines help us reach out in a strategic way to that community? And I think we can. South Africa is another example where we have virtually all the doctors in Canada are from South Africa, and other things. So I think there's those examples of how can we do that.
My answer is yes, we can help Canada. just to get it on record there.
Well, Taiwan has gone to the point that we pretty much done what we can. I mean, short of making homeschooling national compulsory education. But I don't know if I want to go there. But I think we can, in addition to research, I think what other country has done is also a very good tool in terms of policy persuasion. So when Taiwan first started, we're looking at the United States, UK, Ireland, Australia as examples, and Canada. But we pretty much learned from them. So, we all got our money, like the Canadian system, and we got some from Australia and so on. We got the law protection in place. But I think it's important to spread that possibility to other countries so that if the government are saying that, show me the international examples, except United States, because we know there's a U.S. exceptionalism, like U.S. is different. Then you can look at other countries. I mean, even East Asia have a homeschooling policy in place. So, Taiwan used to be a dictator country too. And so there are ways to go about it, and it's not unique to only United States. It's a global value. It's a human right issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Just to go back to Edric's comment, you can have a movement with individuals, but you can also have a movement as nations. And so what happens, what countries, if your country doesn't have many freedoms, you can point to other countries and see this is part of a movement that's just happening worldwide. So you can help us by actually helping yourselves, because then we can point to you as well. We've got time for one more question.
Hi. We thank you very much for being here, and we as Brazilians feel privileged to have this conference going on in our country at this setting, at this national setting that we're being faced. we wanted from our hearts to keep us, you all, in this hotel and never have you leave here. So that yeah, our biggest fears as Brazilians is that when you go away to each one to your homes, this movement fades out or gets cold, because we're in a country of continental proportions. It's hard for us to connect, and we fear each family goes into their hole after this, and we don't see each other anymore, especially us that if we are on the other side of the country. So do you have any, this has been all very enriching for me, and to get ideas and how to move from step to step and then for a big action. Do you have any advice on how to maybe to unite people in such a huge proportion? Or another question is how to change a culture. It's not in our culture, it's totally different. We cannot compare ourselves to the United States. So how to change a culture?
I can answer, yeah. So I see a lot of similarities actually between the Brazilian and the Philippine culture, you know, even religiously and some of the struggles. So I think to change a culture, as I pointed out, it actually starts with you. That's my suggestion. You and your family, and then the families that you know. If they start seeing something different in, if I read your surname from here correctly, is that Brito? The Brito family, you know, there's something different about the Brito family. What are you doing? And you can say, you know what, we've chosen homeschooling. How does that work? And then they catch on. And then their families and their relatives say, what's happening to you? Why are you different? And they say, well, we're homeschooling. And that's exactly what, at least we saw from the video, is how a movement starts. So don't be discouraged, because, you know, I think part of what we try to do is just to kickstart and to be catalysts so you can catch a vision. But once you catch the vision, it's really on you as an individual now to let people see something different so that they might catch on. And the same thing, think about a fire. Once you get it started a little bit and it starts to catch on, it will go ablaze. So that's my encouragement. You'll be surprised at how many people you'll be able to influence because of what they see, and hopefully what they see in you and your family, something good. So that's my 2 cents.
I have another one. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Sergio.
Okay, no, just a very quick one. Don't think less of the human contact. I think the energies that are between people when we are together, they are absolutely amazing. And when you have a meeting like this, it's completely different than when you have a meeting throughout internet, or when you connect through forums or through other ways. So it happens to me that anytime that I go to a meeting, I'm busted with energy, and then fades away, it goes like a little colder, and then I need another one. So if you can have national meetings, you can organize even the smallest things. I mean, 25 people, 30 people, whatever, it will grow. That's my advice. I mean, try to connect yourselves humanly, not only through the nets.
And a lot of times that will be as small as one other family. Just that as you travel, as you interact, you're in another part of your city or another part of your state or another part of your country, find another family and say, could we visit? Could we have coffee? Can we just talk about, I was at this place and I heard some things that you might be interested in. Share them. And actually the next thing you'll know, you'll be a homeschool speaker.
Conference organizer.
On that note, it's time to
Okay.
Okay. Oh, you want? Oh, okay, Irina first.
I have some very quick practical suggestion. We are from which city? You are from Rio?
No, from Campo Grande, Mato Grosso do Sul.
So,
Near Paraguay, I believe.
are there any other people from your city here?
No.
So you're the only one. And is it far away? Is it far away from you? How long it is? Very. But is there a big city close to you? No. Okay. But are there any but are there any other homeschooling families in your city? Behind. Okay. I just wanted to suggest you that the easiest thing to do, if you find at least several people in your country, is a personal contact. Invite them to have book books garage sale. You can go to the library, it's free, agree with them that let us have here some kind of small gathering and invite them to exchange curriculum, and people will come and do this 3-4 times a year, and it will start growing. They will tell others, invite grandparents, and build a community. And do it here, at least make as much personal contact with locals as you can, and make a Facebook group of them.
The other thing that Ray can speak to this even more, but sometimes the meetings need to be secret. Sometimes people need to be assured of anonymity and secrecy in what you're doing, and we need to be prepared to not have everything up on the web and those kinds of things. And we need to be very careful to recognize the needs for those things.
Can be secret Facebook book.
In the U.S., this movement is over 30 years old. I mean, we started our homeschooling journey 32 years ago. And we started going to conferences I say a conference. Some of those were early, essentially secret meetings that were between people you may only know one or two other people in your entire state who homeschooled. Fortunately, we had an individual, Sue Welch, who had a vision for keeping the homeschooling movement going. And so she would host these conferences, and every year it'd be in a different state, and she would get the word out saying, come. And so we would all come with our families, and it continued to grow. The first one that we went to, I think there were only 10 states there out of the 50. This has now grown into what in the U.S. is the National Leadership Conference that we do every year now, a week-long conference. But it took 30 years to grow to that. And it's the key point. I want to echo what Sergio said. The key point is that connection. We would start getting burned out. We'd go to that conference again, and we'd be pumped up and be ready to go, and that would sustain us for another year. My daughters know Gerald's daughters. My daughters have never been to Manitoba. They've only been to Canada once, and that was to see Niagara Falls. So that's but they're Facebook friends. We got to know each other through that, and that created a support group for the leaders, which then helped to really grow the movement.
Well, thank you for helping us to close the meeting there, Joy, giving a very subtle signal there. And thank you to all our panel members on behalf of the board. And thank you for attendance, and please ask any further questions individually later. Thank you for today.